All right, so Japan, huh? Playing a trip.
That's awesome.
One of the most fascinating cultures out there.
Yeah. But, okay, real talk. Before you go,
Mm.
we want to make sure you avoid those, like, total tourist blunders, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So we did this deep dive into this book, Unspoken Rules for Visiting Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, some of this stuff is like, whoa, I had no idea.
It really gets into those, like, deeper cultural things that a lot of typical travel guides just kind of gloss over.
Totally. And that's kind of what we're all about here.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
you're not just there to see the sights, you're there to experience the culture.
100%. So first thing that jumped out at me, this whole emphasis on privacy,
Mm-hmm.
especially in like those moments where you're just like, oh, this is so perfect. Got to get a picture.
Yeah,
Like imagine you see a geisha and your instinct is to whip out your phone.
right. And that's where things can get tricky.
Yeah.
Because what we might see as a harmless photo op can actually be seen as pretty intrusive in Japan.
Interesting.
It's all tied to this concept of wa, which basically means social harmony.
Like maintaining this sense of peace and balance. And even a photo can disrupt that.
So less about being like anti-photography and more about just being aware of your surroundings?
Yeah, and the people in them.
Okay, gotcha. So respect goes beyond just pictures though, right?
Definitely. The guide makes it super clear. Don't touch sacred objects.
Right.
Don't touch bonsai trees.
Yeah.
Don't even touch those like perfectly manicured gardens you see everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how you might get carried away like, oh, it's so beautiful, I want to touch it.
Right. But in Japan, those things hold a much deeper significance. Bonsai, for example, they're not just plants. They represent years of artistry and painstaking care.
Wow.
So touching them,
Yeah.
it's kind of like smudging a brushstroke on a famous painting.
That's a great analogy. I never thought of it like that.
And then personal space, another thing the book really stressed.
Yeah, it did mention that.
Totally different in Japan than a lot of Western cultures.
How so?
Generally much larger. Reflects that need for wa, you know, that harmonious balance.
Oh.
So something like a back pat, or even just like standing really close when you talk,
Yeah.
might be seen as totally normal in some cultures.
Right.
But in Japan, could be pretty intrusive.
So better to err on the side of caution, I guess, especially when you're meeting people for the first time.
Always a good idea. Observe how locals interact with each other and
Yeah.
kind of take cues from that.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got privacy, personal space. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because the guide talks about this contrast between silence and slurping.
Oh, yeah, this is a classic one.
Right, like super quiet trains, hushed conversations. But then when it comes to noodles, slurp away.
Totally embrace the slurp.
I've always found that so fascinating. Why the difference?
It's all about context. Silence in public, it's about consideration for others,
Makes sense.
not creating unnecessary disruption. But when you're enjoying a bowl of noodles, that's slurping.
Yeah.
It's seen as a compliment to the chef,
Yeah.
like you're really savoring their creation.
Okay.
And it actually helps cool the noodles down, too, believe it or not.
Huh. So it's like this specific way of expressing appreciation that fits that experience.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to another big one, punctuality.
Okay.
The guide makes it very clear. Being on time, or even slightly early,
Yeah.
is absolutely crucial, especially for like formal occasions or business meetings.
I've heard stories about those Japanese trains being like insanely on time.
Oh, they are. It's incredible. And it all ties back to that respect for time. It's seen as a shared resource. Wasting someone's time, even by a few minutes, is considered disrespectful.
Wow.
That efficiency is a huge part of what makes Japanese society run so smoothly.
It's amazing how these like seemingly small customs can reveal so much about a culture's values.
Wasn't it fascinating?
Okay,
Oh.
so we've got privacy, personal space, the whole silence versus sleeping thing, and the
Yeah.
importance of punctuality. What else did the guide dive into?
Let's talk about dining etiquette.
Ooh.
There are some specific customs that can definitely catch visitors off guard. For example, did you know it's considered taboo to pass food from chalkstick to chopstick?
No, I did not really.
Why is that?
It seems like a simple gesture of sharing, right?
Yeah.
But in Japan, that action is associated with funeral rites.
What?
Yeah. Like literally passing bones between chopsticks during cremation ceremonies.
Oh, wow. Okay, so not something you want to do at the dinner table.
Definitely not. Are there any other chopstick rules we should know about?
Oh, there are a bunch, and some of them get pretty specific.
Like what?
Like sticking your chopsticks upright in a bowl of rice?
Uh-huh.
Big no-no. Considered bad luck because it resembles incense sticks used at funerals.
It's incredible how much symbolism is packed into these everyday actions.
Right. It
Yeah.
really highlights how important it is to be mindful of those cultural differences.
Absolutely. And that leads perfectly into our next topic, shoes.
Shoes.
So the guide is very clear on this one. Doesn't matter how stylish your shoes are, you
Yeah.
got to take them off before entering homes or certain traditional spaces.
I've heard about that. But why is it such a big deal? It's more than just keeping things clean.
Okay.
It's about separating the outside world with all its dirt and impurities from the sanctity of the home. It's like this symbolic act of respect and purity.
So even something as simple as taking off your shoes carries a lot of cultural weight?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you said earlier, it's not just about sightseeing. It's about experiencing a whole different way of life.
Totally, down to the smallest details. And speaking of unique experiences, the guide also talks about onsen.
Oh, yeah, Japan's famous hot springs.
I've always been fascinated by those.
For good reason. They're amazing. But there's a very specific etiquette that comes with them.
Okay, like what?
Well, for starters, everyone bathes nude.
Whoa,
Okay.
that's something you definitely want to be prepared for.
Yeah, not just your average dip in a hot tub.
So what else?
You got to shower thoroughly before getting in, and your towel can't touch the water.
Wow, so many rules.
It's all about maintaining hygiene and a shared respect for the space.
Sounds like onsen are more than just a way to relax. It's like a ritual, a cultural experience that connects you to nature and this sense of communal harmony.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
It really gets to the heart of what makes exploring Japan so captivating.
Right, like discovering these layers of meaning and tradition.
Exactly. Even in the most everyday things.
Okay. So in this first part of our deep dive, we've covered privacy, personal space, that whole silence and slurping contrast,
Got it.
the importance of being on time,
Punctuality is key.
chopstick etiquette,
Lots of rules there.
taking off your shoes,
Lovely.
the intricacies of onsen.
The whole experience.
I'm starting to realize that navigating Japanese culture is really about being mindful,
Absolutely.
respectful, and open to new ways of thinking.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Awesome. So that's a wrap for part 1 of our deep dive.
We'll be back with more insights from Unspoken Rules for Visiting Japan in the next part.
All right, back for more Japanese etiquette. I feel like we're only scratching the surface here.
Oh yeah, there's so much more to unpack.
And it all comes back to this idea of respect, right?
Definitely. Respect for others, for traditions, for shared spaces.
It's not just about blindly following rules.
No way.
Right.
It's about understanding those deeper values.
Exactly. So what else jumped out at you from this guide?
Let's talk about tipping,
Tipping. Oh,
or rather the lack thereof.
uh-huh.
The guide is super explicit. Tipping is not customary in Japan.
Interesting.
In fact, it can be seen as kind of insulting.
Really?
Like you're implying the service wouldn't be good without that extra incentive.
That's so different from what a lot of us are used to.
It is. It reflects a totally different perspective on work and service.
Makes sense.
In Japan, good service is just expected. It's part of the job, a matter of professional pride.
So no need to tip.
Nope. Trying to tip someone could actually create a really awkward situation.
Oh, wow.
Embarrassment.
Yeah.
Offense. So when in Japan, do as the Japanese do.
Right, just say thank you.
Exactly. Sincere arigato gozaimasu will do the trick.
Gotta practice my Japanese phrases. Okay, moving on. What about greetings?
Ah, yes. Handshakes are out.
Figured as much. So it's all about bowing.
Bowing is the way to go. And it's an art in itself.
Oh, I bet.
The depth, the duration, all convey different levels of respect and formality.
So there's like a whole unspoken language of bowing to learn?
There is. But honestly, the best tip I can give you is just observe.
Okay,
Watch how the locals do it. Follow their lead.
makes sense. Pay attention and just kind of mirror what they're doing.
Exactly. You'll pick it up quickly. A slight nod for casual encounters,
Mm-hmm.
a deeper, longer bow for more formal situations, or when you're showing respect to elders.
So much communication happening without a single word.
It's fascinating, right? What else did we find in this treasure trove of etiquette?
Okay, this one caught my eye. Noise levels on public transport.
Ah, yes. The quiet train.
The guide really emphasizes keeping conversations hushed. No loud phone calls on trains or buses.
It's all about that consideration for others again.
Right. Everyone's just trying to chill or get where they're going in peace.
Exactly. And that respect for shared space extends to things like eating and drinking,
Oh.
generally frowned upon,
Yeah.
especially on crowded trains.
So save the snacks for when you're off the train.
Exactly.
All right.
Even escalators.
Escalator etiquette. Oh, yes.
There are rules.
In Tokyo, stand on the left side.
Okay.
Leave the right side open for people in a hurry.
Gotcha.
But watch out. In Osaka, they do the opposite.
What?
Seriously?
Yep. Left side for walking, right side for standing.
Wow. So even escalator etiquette can be regional.
It's a great reminder to always be observant. Adapt to those local customs,
Wow.
even within the same country.
Good point. Okay, so we've got tipping, bowing, noise levels, escalators. What else?
Let's talk about gift giving.
Okay. Big part of Japanese culture, right?
Huge. It's a way to express gratitude, respect, strengthen relationships.
So what are the rules?
Well, first of all, the wrapping is just as important as the gift itself.
Really? Why is that?
It shows thoughtfulness, care, a sign of respect for the recipient. Different types of wrapping paper ribbons are appropriate for different occasions.
So I can't just slap on any old gift wrap.
Probably not best to wing it. Do a little research beforehand.
Even the wrapping paper has meaning. It's amazing.
It's all about those layers of formality and symbolism. Now, this next one might seem a bit old school.
What's that?
Business cards.
Business cards? I thought everything was digital now.
Not in Japan. In Japan, business cards are still essential.
Huh.
It's an integral part of formal introductions.
Interesting.
Shows respect. Helps establish a connection. And there's even a specific way to handle them.
Okay. How so?
You present your card with both hands,
Okay.
writing facing the recipient. When you receive a card,
Yeah.
take it with both hands. Examine it carefully, then place it respectfully in your card holder.
It's like a whole ritual.
It is all about that mindfulness and respect.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Okay.
Back to photography for a sec.
All right.
The guide reminds us that while taking photos is generally fine, there are certain places where it's just not appropriate.
Temples, shrines, some traditional gardens.
Makes sense. Places where you want to be extra respectful.
Right. Respect the sanctity of those spaces. Be mindful of people who are there for worship or quiet contemplation.
No impromptu photo shoots in sacred spaces. Got it.
And even when photography is allowed, be discreet. No flash photography.
Right. Don't want to be disruptive. Okay. So we've got places where you shouldn't take photos. What about personal belongings? Any rules there?
Big one. Don't rummage through someone else's bag, even if you're trying to be helpful. It's considered rude.
So hands off other people's stuff.
Definitely respect that personal space, that sense of wa.
Always coming back to Hua. I'm learning so much.
Me too. Okay. This one might surprise you.
Hit me.
Public restrooms.
Public restrooms.
Okay. In Japan, it's customary to use the provided slippers when you enter a public restroom.
Slippers, really?
Especially in restaurants or traditional establishments.
Yeah. Never heard of that one.
It's all about hygiene, keeping things separate.
I see.
Clean versus unclean. A way of showing respect for the space and for the people who will use it after you.
So even using the restroom has a whole set of cultural customs.
It does. It's amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mindfulness and respect woven into every aspect of daily life.
Okay, so in the second part of our deep dive, we've covered tipping, bowing, noise levels, escalators, gift giving, even restroom etiquette.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But I'm getting this sense that Japanese etiquette is all about just being aware, considering the impact of your actions on others,
Absolutely.
and approaching everything with a sense of respect and courtesy.
You got it. That's the heart of it.
Okay, so 2 parts down. We've covered a ton of ground on Japanese etiquette.
We have. And I have to say, I'm really impressed by how much depth there is to these customs.
It's amazing, right? It's not just like, do this, don't do that. There's always a deeper meaning.
Exactly. It shows how rich and layered Japanese culture really is.
Totally. But okay, realistically, how do you remember all this when you're actually there?
Right. Because it's one thing to read about it.
Yeah.
It's another thing to actually put it into practice.
Especially when you're in a new environment, trying to figure everything out.
That's where observation comes in.
Okay.
The guide really stresses paying attention to what the locals do.
Makes sense.
Don't be afraid to subtly mimic their behavior, especially if you're unsure.
So it's like a cultural dance, watch and learn?
Exactly. And remember, Japanese people are generally very understanding.
That's good to know.
They know visitors might not be familiar with all the customs.
Right.
A genuine effort to be respectful goes a long way.
Okay. That's reassuring. Now, something else the guide mentioned that I wanted to touch on.
What's that?
The concept of face.
Ah, yes. Face is huge in Japanese culture.
Can you explain that a bit?
Face is all about maintaining social harmony, avoiding embarrassment,
Okay.
both for yourself and others.
Interesting.
It's about preserving dignity and respect in social interactions.
So how does that tie into etiquette?
Well, a lot of the unspoken rules we've talked about are directly related to face.
Okay, give me an example.
Avoiding loud conversations in public,
Mm,
respecting personal space,
yeah.
the whole bowing etiquette.
Yeah.
It's all about making sure everyone feels comfortable and respected.
Like this invisible web of social cues that keeps everything in balance.
Exactly. And understanding that concept of face will really help you navigate things.
Makes sense. Okay, so practical tips. What advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by all this?
First of all, don't stress too much.
Easier said than done.
I know. But it's impossible to know everything beforehand.
Sure.
Mistakes happen. The key is to just approach each situation with respect and a willingness to learn.
I love that. It's not about being perfect.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's the effort that counts.
Okay, what else?
Learn a few basic Japanese phrases.
Like what?
Konnichiwa for hello. Arigato gozaimasu for thank you.
Good ones.
Even those simple phrases show you're making an effort.
Right, it's the thought that counts. Okay, what about packing? Any tips?
Pack appropriately. We talked about shoe removal.
Yeah, gotta be prepared for that.
So comfy, easy to slip on shoes are a must.
Good call.
Modest clothing is generally appreciated, especially for temples and shrines.
Respectful and practical. Okay. Anything else?
Be mindful of nonverbal communication.
Body language.
Exactly. In Japan, gestures can convey as much meaning as words.
Interesting. Like what?
Pointing is considered rude,
Oh, wow.
and direct eye contact can be seen as aggressive.
So much to think about.
It's all about being aware of those subtle cues.
Right. Adjust your behavior accordingly. Okay. Last but not least, any final words of wisdom?
Embrace the experience.
Yeah,
Japan is an amazing country.
it is.
So much beauty, history, tradition.
Well, absolutely.
Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Try new things. Really immerse yourself.
Beautifully said. Well, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into the unspoken rules of Japanese etiquette.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
We have, but it's been super insightful.
I agree.
Even for someone like me who's always been fascinated by Japan, I learned a lot.
It's been a pleasure exploring all this with you and
Yeah.
with our listeners.
Likewise. So remember, folks, traveling to a new country, it's not just about sightseeing. It's about experiencing a different way of life,
Absolutely.
appreciating new perspectives, expanding your understanding of the world.
And who knows? Maybe this deep dive has inspired someone to learn even more about Japan.
That would be awesome.
Until next time, keep those minds open, embrace the journey,
And
happy travels.